may have some questions or responses. Let's do a quick introduction of who's up here, and then I will facilitate and get things started with a question for Chard. But first, the introductions. Let's go acoustic here.
Start introducing.
Eugene.
Hi, Eric. Chard.
David. Can we bring the lights down just a point? Because I'd love to be able to see the audience. Thank you.
Adrian. Allison.
And I'm the other Eric.
Thank you.
So I imagine, my experience with this might be similar to yours in the sense that this is a really unusual piece of theater. So I wonder if we could just start the conversation. I'm going to pass the mic to Chard, and maybe Chard, you could briefly just say a couple of words about how this started.
That's an impossible question, Eric, but I'll try. I just write all the time, and these voices were in my head for a long time, and I taught Western civilization at Providence College for 23 years, and I had to teach Gilgamesh over and over again. Which I loved, especially these lines by Herbert Mason. All that is left to one who grieves is convalescence, no change of heart or spiritual conversion, for the heart has changed and the spirit has converted to a thing it sees how much it costs to lose a person that's loved. So just that language that Mason, especially, there are so many translations of Gilgamesh, but his were the cleanest, and I would just go to bed at night almost dreaming that story of Gilgamesh and Enkidu and Siduri and Utnapishtim and Urur, and it was almost like kind of magic that the languages came to me, voices, as if they were just flying to me over, it was actually 4,000 years from ancient Sumer, where Inanna was the queen of fertility, and Dumuzi, the god of Dumuzi. Now, Inanna didn't actually live. She was a goddess who was like Venus. But Dumuzi did live. He was king of Sumer, ancient Sumerian. And that story, that love affair became so famous. It was written down. It became the story that was discovered in 1947 by an archaeologist who dug up the stones, the tablets, and translated them. And they found out that, my God, this sounds just like what? The Song of Solomon. The Song of Solomon is almost plagiarism of the love song between Inanna and Dumuzi. And so this was one of the great archaeological finds of all time, and was put in a museum in Baghdad, actually Nippur, which is an ancient city. During the Iraqi War, an American soldier stole them. This is a crazy story, just have to warn you. And he sold them, this American soldier sold these tablets to Hobby Lobby. This is true. And the UN found out about it and demanded that Hobby Lobby return them immediately, which they did. So they're back in Iraq. Iraq, Uruk, sound familiar? That's where it comes from. So just the ancient, it just is so amazing the kind of diachronic history of this story, how powerful it still is to all of us, you know, that it goes back 4,000 years. So anyway, how did I come to write it? So I was not writing a book, I was just writing these poems, and I woke up one day after several years and realized it was a conversation without knowing it. So I view this whole play as a gift, really, that you know, and one of my great heroes and mentors in my career as a poet is Rousseau. And she always used to say to me, I spent many, many, many hours with Ruth at the end of her life. I interviewed her up in Goshen. And she always used to say, I'd say, Ruth, where did that poem come from? Or that come from? She said, I did not write it. She said, that's what she called it. And so I always said, what do you mean? Of course she wrote it. But she just would insist that she didn't. And now after writing this play, I know exactly what she meant. I did not write it. It just happened. And I know that's going to sound like, I don't know, a cop-out to your question, but it's exactly the way I feel.
So everyone, we have before you the composer, the artist, the writer, 2 actors, a choreographer, and a director. Please, is there anything you would like to address to anyone or everyone?
Talk about the paintings.
I was hoping I'd get away with having to say. Actually, they follow a very ancient timeline too, and that goes back to September 1989, when I first met Chard. So I love that Chard frames this up as a conversation. I had no idea, in fact, that September, late August, September, up on the hill at the Putney School, that our lifelong conversation would amount to a project like this. And in so many ways, I mean, there are many divergent paths, and I'm a great digressionist, so you know, I go here and I go there. Chard's pretty good at that too, it turns out. But somehow we always come together, you know, at a point, some exclamation point or some kind of punctuation, and it's often outdoors, and it's often lately, in the past several years anyhow, it's been in Chard's meadow down below his house. You pass through a ravine, you pass down a ravine into a marvelous clearing, and the sun shines in August, and you know, it is truly another world. And it also represents the sort of the path of my own paintings that are largely represented here, you know, that go through the forest, into, you know, through light and shade, in conversation, and into meadows and clearings, fires, wood piles, and things like that. And so that's about, I guess, something to say about the paintings. There is something amazing that happened for me, though, in the process of putting this together, this conversation, which is not something that I typically do. I essentially gave my paintings to a director and to the lighting designer, and in conversation without Chard, Eric and Francesca helped us decide, and the actors too, to a certain extent, like mood, tone, shape, color, pace, all of which is, these are characteristics of paintings themselves, but they became separate, right, from the paintings. These aren't paintings, they're projections, but they have to sort of live in light and space, and I owe so much of that interpretation, right, to Eric, and of course to the actors who lived among them for this period, and the choreography, which really I hadn't spent much time with the choreographer, but it's the dances, the interludes, and the paintings are joined, right? So it's it's an amazing, this is really a privilege of a lifetime, frankly. And I'm sort of honored to be part of it. So, thank you for that. Thank you, Chard.
Thank you. Thank you. So, I just really also just more quickly. I just had no idea that it was going to come together like this, and I really want to thank Eric Bass for having the vision to do all of this, and to, I just can see him thinking about it. You know, when I showed it to him. Oh yeah, there has to be music. Oh yes, there has to be dance. Oh yes, there has to be choreography. It has to be painting, and I just never actually envisioned it in that way. And it's just been a revelation to me to see how he was able to bring it all together in this way. So I want to thank you, Eric. You've just done such a great job with this. Thank you. And Adrian and David, what a performance. Thank you so much. I mean, I just really felt you were these two. I mean, I just felt like you somehow translated the language into yourselves, you know, in a way. I mean, actors always have to do that, but you did it in a way that just really so deeply moved me. So, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I was struck by all of the memorization of those parts. It was incredible to witness. Thank you. I was just saying to my partner Moti today, you know how they track the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama? I wonder if anyone else's reincarnation is tracked in such a way. I wonder, and then like seeing this, I'm struck by, it's almost, it's a story in a way of reincarnation of their, these gods and goddesses throughout time. And you're kind of seeing this little sliver between two incarnations. So I'm curious if you have come to form any opinions or have any revelations about that through the process of engaging with this myth and how that showed up for you.
Yeah. So did everybody hear the speaker's question?
Good question.
You're talking about reincarnation. It started with tracking the Dalai Lama's reincarnations, and here we are, kind of in the same vein. I would love to pass the mic to Eugene, because I think your music comes from thinking about some of these same things right now. Is that right? Yeah. So here goes the mic.
I'm going to pause it just for a second. On its way. What's interesting, in the script, there are several, 3 or 4 references to when I first met you, and every time it's in a different place, which gave me the thought that, oh, okay, they're reincarnating. I first met you in the garden, first met you in the marketplace, first set eyes on you, and so, yeah.
I've never been selected as an expert on reincarnation before. But as it turns out, I've been reading a lot about near-death experiences and also out-of-body experiences this fall. And when I was handed this extraordinary script, I recognized some of the imagery and some of the kind of spiritual feeling in it that has to do with timeless relationships and relationships over time. And so I felt a great kinship with this script, actually. And when I first looked at it, it seemed to me kind of like looking at the universe from a distance, just because I couldn't understand it at all. And so I'm so grateful for the work that Chard and Eric did, which was really to kind of map it out, to kind of give us, give me a kind of an entryway to some of the different emotion and the different aspects of storytelling that were going on there, which was so very, very helpful. just anticipating your fascination with the music. Thank you. I'm very much in Chard's camp of not really being willing to take credit for it. The very first time we sat down with the actors in the script, which is a little over a year ago, the cello I just found playing this 3-note theme, which was all half steps apart, against an open A string, which created a dissonance of those 3 notes. And there was something about that that just rang so true for us and for Ty, my friend and composer up there, who was really very helpful in kind of amplifying my own instinct for this stuff. That essentially the score is just a riff on those 3 notes. You heard them repeated in very, very different guises, different incarnations, if you will. And so it was a simple thing, really.
Eugene is referring to Tyler Gibbons, who's right up there.
I had a question for the choreographer.
Yeah.
How did you collaborate with Gene? Did you have the music sort of laid out for you before you started imagining the dance?
Oh, I wish. I almost always work for music. And so when Eric suggested that I come on board with this project, I was like, but there's a bunch of words. I don't know what that means. So I let him worry about the words, and I would come into rehearsal and I would say, okay, Eric, we have a dance ahead of us. What do we need to do? Where does the chair need to go? Are the dancers or the performers on the floor? Do they need to get up again? Do they need to end up on the floor? What's the movement vocabulary that they've created for us already in the bringing of the poems to life? And how can we work with that? So that was my material. And then Eugene came in at the end and everything started to sing. So
Nice job.
thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm curious about these tablets that were found, and how old, the story is 4,000 years old, but before 1947, what was known of the story and how was it,
That's a very good question. I wish I could be a little bit more specific. Obviously, they were around long enough to influence the writer of Song of Solomon. So they were around biblical times,
Right.
which was much later. So that's so it's almost impossible to know. When how they got buried, where was it a war? And how did this guy in 1947 find them? Exactly. It was just
but
one
was
of
the
those
story
miracles.
there before? I mean, in actuality, was it an oral tradition that was?
Yes, it was like so much in ancient literature. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
But
yet-
they were written. There is
Right.
there's sort of like the Rosetta Stone.
And that story, is it like Homeric? Is it like a long tale?
Yes, but in a little different part of the world. It's right there in the Fertile Crescent. So if you look at the map, you'll see the Mediterranean and Israel and so on. And then further east you get to Mesopotamia, and that's the oldest culture that we have. As far as a written text or an oral text that influenced such powerful poems as the Song of Solomon. So
I'm just fascinated by how much life you brought in these two characters. That was
well, thank you.
usually those the stories. It's a lot is left up to the imagination.
Mhm.
There wasn't a whole lot left to the imagination here.
No. I mean, what's the amazing thing about the story, not just, the play I wrote, but just here we are in 2025, and you read the Song of Solomon, you read the ancient text of Inanna and Dumuzi, and you feel like, well, can't get any more present or powerful than that, you know? It's just, there's that human constant, in our experience as human beings. That's just revolves around love, corruption, all of the great sort of archetypal themes that just never, that are timeless. And so no matter how smart and technological and scientific we may think we are, the sort of the bottom line is what I try to write about, which is, you're just our humanity. Yeah.
Will.
So I don't know who to address this question to, but a design decision was made so that the actors would never actually touch one another. And I love that. That's all I'm going to say about it. I would love to hear that discussed, like maybe the originator, who that popped into their mind, Thought it was powerful.
That would be me.
Okay.
So in a nutshell, Chard gave us this script, but it's not exactly what one would find in a play. It really is a sequence of poetry, which I think Chard, perhaps intuitively, I don't know, clustered. And so what we needed to do to make it theatrical was to find the arc and to find the source of the tension, right? Because the main ingredient in any play is the tension. And it's as we were working, as Adrian and David and I primarily were working, I don't know how it happened, but it just, as I watched them embody and articulate this text and express this text in a human voice, somehow the tension itself spoke and it said, yes, but they're not alive. And every time they touched, the play became about the human body. And so I guess I made a proposition, and the work, Adrian and David, you probably could say more about this, but the work essentially became about how do two lovers love who are never allowed to touch. And that, I would say, that was the main ground rule that we worked with. So I'm so happy you saw that. I'm going to pass this to Adrian for a moment, and maybe you'd like to comment about that as an actor.
So the really interesting thing about working with this poetry and with this play is exactly what Eric said. The poems, they say one thing. They have interesting patterns. We get ideas of ancient Sumerian. We have ideas of sugaring in the spring in New England that juxtapose across time. And so what I spent a lot of time working with was this idea of not being fixed in time. And so as Eric pulled us into a pattern of a dramatic arc, and as we colored the poems more and more with the agony of not being with one another, that timelessness and that growing realization that timelessness was indeed timeless really began to move the work with the language and create the relationship and the utter tragedy between the two of us.
It was very frustrating at times. Eric was the touching police, you know, you're touching,
I know, right?
you're touching, no touching. It was, but you know, it was so frustrating that I at one point brought up, there's gotta be a payoff. They've gotta touch at the end. They have to, you know, the audience is gonna want, like, you know, touch me on the lips, and it's just that little kiss, and it'll be, you know, but didn't happen. There you go. We saved it for the curtain call.
There seems to be no, there are no unisons either. There are no unisons.
No
And
unisons.
Eugene, I'm not sure whether or not, but even in your looping, it seems like you're playing opposite of like you're not creating chords. So that there's actually very little that's touching anywhere in it's utterly tragic.
Could you pass it to Eugene?
And that the only thing are the paintings, which are almost a unison, but they're not quite the same place, or there's one's enlarged and one is smaller, so that we're kind of in the same place, but not quite in the same place between scenes, but it's interesting that that in the language chart, they never say the same thing once. Like there's no, did they really love each other? They bet they did, but it's like, and I was trying to figure out why there was such a tension, besides not touching, which was really beautifully done, but,
I'll just say one more quick thing about this stuff, because, I mean, as I said, I didn't really realize I was writing it for many years. I think this is the way that often the best things get written, that your unconscious works, you know, in a way that you can't be too conscious of it. And so it was only after about 3 or 4 years after I started putting all these poems together that I was just writing, oh, here's a little lyric here, here's a little lyric there, that I was, wait, this is a conversation. And who is it a conversation between? So I think every writer has to think about, novelists, poets have to wonder, well, who's talking here? Because, you know, so many writers will say they're just transcribing, you know, and my old friend Bruce Stone always used to say that. And I'd say, oh, come on, you know. No, she would just swear she almost hit me when I was denying. And so then I just said, well, let me just see how this might work as a conversation, not as a play. And so I started just saying, well, where do I begin? And so I just found a beginning, and then I found, you know, a response to that, and then a response to that. And even though, as you're saying, you know, it jumps all over the place, I felt like there was a thread, you know, a thread of conversation. And so in a way, I guess the poem is, I mean, the play is kind of paradoxical in that way, an apparent contradiction that's nonetheless true, because, you know, it jumps all over the place, but I think there's a thread, you know, that runs throughout it, you know, that is maybe based, you might say, to the love that they feel that's so strong. And so here's the thing about love, it can just go all over the friggin' place. It can go, you know, to Bavaria one minute, and, you know, to Spain the next, and to, you know, so, and still makes sense. So that's that great paradox. So now I try to think, well, what poets, you know, I just read quite a bit all the time, is T.S. Eliot, you know, 4 quartets, that still point that he writes about. He got it. He really got it, as crazy as T.S. Eliot was. And so I hope that in this play there is a still point around which all of this other stuff revolves, and you can say, yeah, it's okay for them to talk 1 minute about, you know, the stuff that comes up in the play, the insect on the branch 1 minute, or, you know, the date palms, or are so that's that spontaneity and that surprise. That's stuff you didn't know you freaking knew, that just somehow comes together, or it doesn't. And I was surprised after just working for years and years on this, how some of these weird things were coming together in the play around that still point in the play. And that still point was everything to me.
I think just one or two more questions. You had one, and you get the last word.
Nobody up there had a question beyond the rail?
Well, all right, maybe three more questions. Yes, please.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about contact improv and the cradle of civilization and the power. You do not need to physically touch. And that it transcends somehow, and to me it would have been diminished. And that it would go from the wood pile in Vermont to the Sumerian skies. And that it felt like an antidote to these times. That this is love, it's sensual, it's felt, and it transcends all of our civilizations, including beginning with the cradle of civilization. Thank you.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Did everybody hear this? Okay.
And he's contact improv too.
Well, I was gonna ask, how did this change, doing this play, change your life? And it could be for anybody, but I'm particularly interested in the actors in embodying these roles. Like when you embody something that has this kind of power, like how does that change you?
Right. Well, it's not every day that you get to be a goddess. and embodying a goddess, especially a goddess of fertility and sensuality. And so it allows you to have permission, really, not to be a prude. It allows you to get into your body and move it in ways that we don't usually move it in November in New England. It allows, and actually I want to say that Chard's poetry does this as well, because many of my favorite verses are ones that don't stop. They go from image to image to image and just kind of flow from one thing to another without a sentence structure even to hold it, but it makes this interesting sense. And so I feel that is a sensuality in and of itself.
That's cool. Thank you, what she said. It allowed me, it's quite different from anything I've ever done, and I guess the closest would be Shakespeare, because it's also in verse. But what it allowed me to do was free up gestures that you would never do in a kind of representational play. You know, that you could go move the pile from. You never do that. That would never go, or things like that. Dance moves that coordinate with text. It was really fun to be freed up to do that kind of thing. I didn't know I was going to be getting up and down on the floor quite as many times as I was going to, so I'm kind of living in knee pads at the time. So that was different too. But it worked really well. But thank you, Allison.
So, last question, someone over here. Didn't you ask a question already?
I did, but I don't remember.
Yes, but I prefer to give it to someone who hasn't asked one yet. So, if you don't mind. Thank you. Somebody?
Well, go ahead.
So, it seems to me that it was really a stroke of genius that they never touched. feel the play is a lot about separation, a lot about death and life, and yet a way to live in that separation. And I think that that's perhaps close to the still point that Chard is talking about, because our mortality is something that we feel very strongly about, and yet rarely confront directly the way this play does.
Yeah, thank you for that, and that's really beautiful.
We do the last question.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to reply, just one thought, which is I think for many of us, especially in kind of my age group, we kind of live in this space anyway. You know, I mean, we're here, we're in our bodies, right? But you know, I mean, part of us is kind of
On the way out.
on the way, well, yeah, on the way out. Thank you. I'm not the poet, so thanks. So I think this kind of without being literal about an afterlife, I think the quality of leaving, which is the quality in which Inanna and Dumuzi live within this piece is not unfamiliar. Yeah.
We all know we're gonna lose our loved one.
Well, there it is. Yeah, and that discussion is probably fairly current. It's your moment.
Take it away.
No, I feel like that was
Just one more, really quick thing, just one more last.
Okay, Chard gets the last word, and then we'll say goodnight.
I mean, all this discussion, you know, you think here. I think that, I realize now that the one-liner idea that was occurring to me the whole time I was writing this play was a line from Ecclesiastes. Read my favorite book in the Bible. God has put eternity into the minds of men and women, but so they can't figure out what's happened from beginning to end. Isn't that incredibly wonderful? So this play really that's kind of the underpinning, I would say, if you can think about that for this whole project.
Thank you for coming.